Hey YouTube, this is Pastor Access again. I'm going to go ahead and go through a teaching today instead of preaching. This is a Sunday school lesson that we use in our weekly Bible study. And this week we went through Revelation chapter 20. It's within the end times. And when you go through Revelation and you start in chapter 20, it can easy to be pretty lost if you've never read the book of Revelation or you don't have a timeline for what God has in the end of days and end times. So I'll just give you a very brief and basic skeleton to kind of hang some of this information on. I teach from a premillennial, pre-tribulation view. Premillennial meaning the tribulation comes before the 1,000-year reign of Jesus, which is the millennium. And pre-tribulation, meaning that the rapture happens at the beginning of the tribulation view. Now, of course, in our Sunday school and our Bible study, I've gone to great lengths to explain all those views in depth. And for today, I won't have time to do that. But I can give you some basic events that happened before what we're talking about and give you an idea to understand, or give you something to be able to hold on to help you understand some of the things that are going on. Just before this, of course, we're starting in Revelation chapter 20. And so if you go back to where we're at right now, we're in what's called the church age. The church age started the day of Pentecost, after Jesus had risen up into heaven. And the church started then. And so the church age started then, and all the way up until now, we're still in it. Very soon, I believe, we'll have the rapture, and we will start the tribulation, which is a 7-year period, 7 years of God's judgment on earth for the sin that has been committed. And at the end of that 7 years, and all those judgments are done, there is the Battle of Armageddon, where the armies of the world line up in the valley of Megiddo, and they square off against Israel and Jerusalem. And then God and His holy ones, it says, which could be angels, could be us, come and assist Israel in that battle, and Israel wins it by a landslide, and there is a great slaughter. And at the end of that starts the Millennial Kingdom, and that's where we're at right now, the 1,000-year period where Jesus rules from the earth. And so chapter 20 of Revelation, starting in verse 1, says, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven with the key to the abyss, and a great chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss, closed it, and put a seal on it so that he would no longer deceive the nations until the 1,000 years were completed. After that, he must be released for a short time." And so you see in this passage here, you have one angel comes down and binds Satan and puts him away in the abyss, which means hell, for 1,000 years. And it's interesting to see that it's only one angel that is able to do this. God gives the power to this one angel to be able to bind up Satan for 1,000 years. He's able to do it without a whole army of angels. It's just one angel. And so, of course, Satan is powerful, but God is much, much more powerful. Sometimes we make the mistake of trying to put God and Satan kind of on the same level as far as power goes. But there's really no contest. In fact, Satan can't do anything without God granting the permission for it to happen. If you look at the angel that went to go attack Job, he went up into heaven and God gave him permission and allowed him to be able to do what he did because God had planned to use it for His purposes. And so God is always in control. God is always all-powerful, and God is always has much more power than Satan has. And so it's always important to remember. One question that a lot of people have, though, when they read this, is they see Satan bound, and they say, why in the world is Satan only bound during the Millennial Kingdom? Why does God allow him right now to go and tempt people, to be a divider, to be an accuser of the brethren, all these things that Satan does? Why does God allow him to do that now instead of binding him up now? Why didn't He bind him up so he didn't even tempt Adam and Eve? And the thing is the Millennial Kingdom is a unique time. It is the only time that Jesus will rule from the earth, and all people in the earth will worship him. They'll all come at the Feast of Tabernacles and come and worship him. People from all around the world will do that. He will sit in Jerusalem and he will reign. And so in order for that to happen, in order for the lion to lay with the lamb, and in order for there seemingly to be no sin, and there seemingly to be no death, as those passages kind of allude to but don't come out and say it, Satan would have to be bound up, because if he was loose and he was doing his normal thing, none of that stuff would be able to happen, because he would be tempting people and sin would be in the world, and rebellion would be happening. And so it's important that he is bound up. And so it's a very different time frame, dispensation, as some people would say, where God is acting in that way and Jesus is reigning from Jerusalem. That's God's purpose in binding Satan during that time only. And so that's what happens then. And then we get on, and verse 4 says, "Then I saw thrones, people seated on them, who were given authority to judge. I also saw the people who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of God's word, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, or had not accepted the mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until 1,000 years were completed. This is the resurrection, or this is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God in the Messiah, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years." So there's some points in here and some interesting things that we need to discuss. First of all, we see people sitting on thrones, and the ones that are ruling, specifically talked about being ruling within the Millennial Kingdom, are people who are martyrs, people who have been beheaded because they didn't worship the beast or his image, and they chose to honor God with their commitment to him. And so as we see this, we see that God rewards people's sacrifice. You know, anything that we do for God, for the sake of the gospel, he'll always reward us. In the book of Mark, it talks about how Jesus said that anything that we sacrifice for the sake of the gospel, God will reward 100-fold. And God always rewards our sacrifice and the things that we do for him. And you see that here with the saints that are martyred. God gives them a special reward for their sacrifice and their faithfulness to him. He allows them to sit on thrones and rule during the Millennial Kingdom with Jesus. Pretty awesome honor, but he allows them to do that. We also see in here that the method of execution that the Antichrist chooses to use within his empire, and that's beheading, which is interesting because in our society in the U.S., it's been a long time since somebody's been beheaded as a form of execution, at least from the government. And so if you think about lethal injection, electrocution, all of the things that have been used, those are all things that we are familiar with. But here's going back to more of a medieval execution of beheading. And it's interesting because the one group that has started beheading again on the earth are the Muslims. They have chosen to do that, and some people see this as a clue or evidence for the belief that the Antichrist empire is going to be at least led by, if not composed of, the caliphate, the Muslim nation that is all united, and it will be the Muslims that are part of the Antichrist, or they will be the Antichrist empire. And I don't necessarily think that it specifically means that in this particular passage. I think there's a lot of evidence that the Antichrist empire will center in Rome, and we'll get into that on another day. There's a lot of evidence to go back and forth with a lot of those things, but some people see it as that way. And it is interesting that beheading is the method of execution that the Antichrist does use. So that's halfway through the chapter. I'll go ahead and end this video now, and we'll start up with part 2 is in verse 7. I hope you look at that video as well. And thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.